It's funny you mentioned that because I think I think we're seeing the beginnings of that now with World Anvil, for example.
Exactly, and they have the project Deios. That's the closest I've seen to moving in that direction. So there will be some first ones that are kind of so and so, and there will be, but it will probably take 5 years until you have something that is so good and bulletproof that it will reach the mass market, like Roll20 and Fantasy Grounds are done now within the virtual tabletop tools, or Hero Lab have done in character management and stuff. So but that's my roughly 5 years from now, we will have a tool that is good enough that can basically handle everything digitally.
Yeah, and you were talking about, Danny was talking about zooming in on your maps all the way down, and that's, I think, Project Deios, if they end up getting it like they want it, that's what it'll be. You'll have Greyhawk map, and then you zoom down to a city and zoom down to the building, and then
and one of the key things I think is that my map is kind of cool to look at, but I want each DM to be able to modify it, meaning that city is now sacked, so make a ruin out of it, and that road leads that way, and I want a little village here, and now we have an orc's nest, or the Sahagin lair here, then I add that symbol and write the name. So I want the maps to be a living thing, because in my sessions I edit the map every session. I add things and change things every session. So that's why I don't like print maps much, because it's just a waste of paper for me. Next session I'm screwed and I have to print it again. So I want every DM who use my maps to be able to do what I do. Now it requires Illustrator and a lot of knowledge in Illustrator to do it, but I'm trying to find solutions for it. And right now we're not there yet, but we're getting there quickly.
Yeah, it'll be nice when people can collaborate. So, you've already given us some really interesting industry insights. I kind of was hoping that's the way it would go too, because I think part of the point of this show is not just for people who are just interested in playing D&D or running a game, but want to kind of know, like, what's it like, to do this for a living, or maybe not even do it for a living, but do it semi-professionally, to do it for real. So rather than ask you to tell you how your future competition can help be helped, I was going to ask about how to talk about new and upcoming cartographers, but maybe that question changes to, like, you're running a game and you're about to make a map. Like, what are the most important things to convey? Let's say you only had a couple of hours to put together a map for a game. Like, what's your advice to someone on the important things to convey in that map?
First, for me, there's two. When it comes now, we're talking big maps that covers like a barony or a kingdom or a setting first, because they're different from location maps like in house or dungeon. But let's take the large area map. I want to have an area where we're going to have the next campaign or the next number of sessions. First of all, for me, there's two kinds of maps. One is the map that the DM uses to inspire and plan and figure out where things are in the world. The kind of the accurate map that has a lot of information. And it's also inspirational, that the DM will show the players gradually as they progress, meaning so they should be able to track their going from town here out to the dungeon, or out to the elven tree, or the marches where the evil cult is, or something like that. So that's one map, and then the other map is let's say the characters want to say that, okay, we go to the big city to get a map that covers the kingdom, or their patron that gives them the mission will simply hand over a map. That's a completely different map. My Greyhawk map is not something I want to hand over to the players. But if they go and buy a map, they will get something scribbly that is sketchy and look like a medieval parchment. So I would first figure out, I need a sketchy map that shows me as a DM where things are, and I can fill in the details, and realize it doesn't need to look good. It just needs to work for you. And that's the key. So start figuring out the big lays of the land, meaning if you say, okay, this is the kingdom where everything is going to happen, then sketch out the kingdom. And if things don't have to match down to even half a mile, things can be 50 miles within. First decide, is this a kingdom that is 1,000 miles across, or is 100 miles, or is there coastline, major rivers, the big features? And once you have the majority of the features dialed in, then you can start making more accurate ones of the little area. And don't map in detail before the players are there, so to speak, and kind of put it in gradually, work it in, and don't try to make a masterpiece before you run the campaign. I don't do that. If I come to an area and I fill in the details as I plan the game, I say, okay, now we need a village here and we need some a keep there, and I give it a name, and then so kind of my campaign map evolves over for each session, basically.
Yeah, for sure. As quickly as players can derail a game session.
Yep.
You wouldn't want to go too far into your.
Yep. But if you're really good at landscapes or something, you can kind of do the landscape before and then fill in the details as it. That's what I've done with Greyhawk. I now have my canvas that I can play on, so to speak.
Yeah, I can't agree more. That I tell my players frequently, I'm basically backing up away from them on the road as they come at me, and I'm just trying to keep their awareness of enough things so that they can make decent decisions, and I don't have to work too hard with extraneous information that won't ever be used.
Yeah, and try make them make non-good decisions, so to speak. To try and make them to make bad decisions.
Yes,
you derail them deliberately at times. That's also
yes. Yeah, that's the old finger on the scales rule. You know, how heavy is that finger, and then how often do you use it? Some games get off the rails pretty quickly and easily. Well, I think we're going to take just a break here for a second while we get ready for our next segment. We're going to talk a little about virtual tabletop gaming. We can all join in the discussion, but we do. I guess we should mention that we're going to be discussing Dungeon Fog, World Anvil, Painter Studio Incarnate in a upcoming segment. So those are things that like everybody kind of has access to in this space, and people can quickly come up with quite good looking maps. So people who like me, who really want it to look pretty, they still have quite some limitations, but I encourage people to go look at those tools, and we can get those links probably somewhere in the doobly-doo at some point. But I guess,
that doobly-doo.
Take a look at it.
Hashtag shirt. Can we get a shirt that's double?
Hashtag says doobly-doo on it? Yeah. So, Jimmy, you were going to talk a little bit about, I'm sure that Fantasy Grounds is going to come up.
Fantasy Grounds.
And World Anvil, and I know Matt's going to have something to say about World Anvil as well. I do virtual tabletop, but I'm only local, so I don't broadcast or do anything like that. So I can only speak to the table with the TV in it that I use. I'll get to that when it's my turn. So, Jimmy, if you kind of want to just talk a little bit about, what your setup is and why you do things the way you do them, and just go for it.
Well, yeah, I'd be more than glad to. And yes, I am a proponent of the Fantasy Grounds platform. And some of the stuff that
got an upgrade or something coming pretty soon.
There's something called Unity, and it's something kind of big for this platform, which is aged like fine wine. But now it is time for a overhaul to go into the new millennium and bring up a 64-bit engine. So Doug and the guys over at Smiteworks have put that together. So it should be out at the end of the year. Well, the Kickstarter was extremely successful for them. So we congratulate them on that, and we look forward to seeing what they're doing. And the map making, I would love to be able to show that feature, but don't have that copy yet. But the abilities to make like Anna was talking about, some of the dungeon mapping and stuff on the fly, I am truly looking forward to, so that if a scenario or something comes up in a game, and I don't have that particular map at the moment, you can draw it right then and there and make that scenario work out to continue the gameplay. But with just some of the showcasing, what we use right now for the mapping is the first thing is an extension that we load up in the Fantasy Grounds interface on your data area. Where did it go? I had it right in front of me. Enhanced Images. It's an extension that's available on the forum. What this will do is allow you to add layers to the map, so that if I have a map, and I'll bring up Fantasy Grounds here real quick. Let me load up this lovely interface. And bring up a campaign, and we're going to go to Battlegrounds, even though load this up real quick. But what we'll do is I can take a map, which we have one of Anna's we're going to showcase here, but I want to lay in some assets that may be extra needed for the encounter. And what we'll do here when it loads up is I'm going to add a little campfire to the terrain map, and then I'll lock that asset down so that the players can still see it, but they can't interact and mess with it. So
yes,
okay, and that then allows us with Anna and some of the other cartographers that use their graphic assets. We love, for map makers and guys that run Fantasy Grounds, I'm saying, the more maps you can give us, the more assets I can get a hold of, the more stuff we get to have fun with. Because I'm not a creator, but I am the creator when I get into this.
And not gridded, right? And no grid.
Yes, so that I was going to say that because this, I don't believe that, I can't remember this. We'll load up this map here real quick. I think it has a small faint grid on it. But yes, the Fantasy Grounds group, we don't like grids on the maps. We prefer, I think I had taken it off. So if I pull
I should have given you the non-gridded or the ones with the one, because I had both of them. They will be printed in a grid for the printed version and a non-grid for the VTT version.
Well, that was Danny had spoke on the question a little bit, and I was it was one of the questions I wanted to ask was chatting with you when you're looking at the maps and on the technical side of incorporating the grids or no grids, but looking at it from the virtual tabletop side, what are those parameters? You just create the map and then print it, and make it a digital image based on the platform they're off of, because I know Fantasy Grounds and the Roll20 side, the mapping size is a little different. But what technical, what goes in your head on the technical side when you're creating that map?
Yeah, the problem is that print, you need really high resolution. The print, then you're talking 300 DPI or something, 300 little dots per inch, meaning something that covers a book page should be 5,000 by 7 by 5,000 pixels or something like that in order to look really good on a printed. And we're talking a poster map 24 by 36, we're up in the 20,000 pixels. But a map in Fantasy Grounds, that I think the limit is still 1,000 pixels. That's it, or something like that. You can't do it much bigger. So So you immediately run into huge problems because you have to create it for the book, because that's what you get paid for to do first, and then you have to scale it down. And books, they have the problem that they have the letter format usually. So that means that and VTTs, then it's a square format because you simply can you can go in squares. So right now there is the technical specifications are very different depending on one media or the other, so to speak. So that's still a problem. I think it will change, because I think that digital will probably be the premier way of the normal way of distributing content within a few years, and the printed map will be a separate version. It will be a coffee table book, so to speak.
Like vinyl.
Unfortunately,
exactly.
yes. Like vinyl. Yeah, that's true, Danny.
I think that's where because I don't think that books will go away at all, but they will be different. They will not be used for lookup rules and for use at the game table, but they will be used to inspire and to show people I have an awesome collection, and to impress your relatives and stuff like that, that you have the coolest gaming books ever. That's where I think they will be in the future.
Yeah, I think I'm not even sure that future is that far off. I mean, quite honestly.
Yeah.
That's everything I'm buying now. Yeah, it's PDF or digital stuff for.
I've got, let's see, I can't see it on here, but back. Oh yeah, right there. So I've got the. I went and got the collector's edition of the whole box set for 5th edition, and it's still in the cellophane. I didn't even unwrap it. Yeah. I've got the PDF. I've got the PDF version as well, so don't need to.
Funny you should mention that too. This is a complete aside, but I came across this thing called AnyFlip. I don't know if anybody's heard of this, but it's a book format. I found Lost Minds of Fandelver online in this format. I don't know. It was just like out in the open. So I click on it, and it's like a flippable page. Now, I'm sure that the content itself was not licensed to be put up there like that, but like that is great because it feels like on your screen. If you had a 24-inch monitor in front of you and it was touch, you could just flip those pages. You could size, all that kind of stuff. Very cool.
All right. Well, but
All right, Joey, so we got
yeah,
that.
no, it's
So-
okay. No, it's example. So yes, we have the grid version, but we can with Fantasy Grounds, and yes, I think I saw Dale open up the Unity engine will actually address that in the maps. Now we'll actually be able to grow exponentially within the interface because of the memory systems that the machines that you're going to be limited by what you're running on.
Yeah, you go to 64-bit, I guess. I hope.
Pretty much, yes. It is 64-bit all the way, and with that creating of the maps and the dynamic lighting and the dynamic already, I know Roll20 already has the dynamic, line of sight. Fantasy Grounds is going to have that, and then they're going to have the effects, the weather effects, and other movement actually being able to put onto the map and on the on the overlay. But the main thing, real quick, is just showing that on the grid version. I'm going to slap one down here real quick. What we like to do is we've got this interface that allows, up here at the top, I've got layers. And so what I do is I go down to the bottom layer and I can add in a campground here. And now when I lock that layer and I come back up to the top, I can no longer, so it's just one of the simple things that you can do inside Fantasy Grounds to add extra flavor to the map that you may not get in here, and I could add in tents if I wanted to and play around, and then I can make my little camp, and here I go, and now my players cannot mess. Whoops, I put it on the wrong layer. That would be why. Ooh, don't show that, Duff. Cut that in editing. And then
Catch it in post.
So, yeah, exactly. Catch it in post. So, but anyway, so that's then the Fantasy Ground side. That is some of the, in this interface right now, some of the simple tricks of the trade that you can do to give these lovely maps that we have in front of us here to showcase and have our players enjoy with the artist's permission also. So
yes, definitely. Yep, that was the idea. Yeah,
exactly right.
I will say that resizing and placing stuff definitely is easier, even in the current version of Fantasy Grounds, than it is in Roll20. And as an aside, for those who are going to stick around right after the show, I'll do the same thing in Roll20 to kind of show you how that works as well. Anna, that brings up a question for me. So, are you getting full detailed map requests, or are you watching the stream? Were you able to see what map you pulled up with the river and the banks on both sides?
I think it was Zombie
Sky Press.
Go.
Yeah, this was Scott Gable. He did it for, I forgot what it was, something fairies, something like that. It's like 2 years ago or something. And I got the book. So this one was simply, he had some descriptions of I think it was 5 different locations, and I just went wild with it. And that's one of my first tries making local area maps. I'd never done them before, but thanks to using the same, and I'm starting to get my Photoshop mojo, so to speak. So now I'm starting to be enough of an expert in Photoshop that I can take almost any texture and layer styles. And when I see a map now, I can understand how it's done. I'm starting to get so good at textures and layering and styles and blend modes and stuff, so I can kind of look at it and see, that's how they done it. So now I can kind of steal ideas just from seeing it. I don't have to steal the pictures, pixels. I can just see it. And you also have the tools that can generate wood textures or stone textures or whatever. So I have these, that grass or whatever material I want. I can put it in and mixture with it, and out comes a seamless. How many pixel size I want, so to speak, of a wooden floor or some sort of stone tile or whatever. Yeah. So that's the tool you need as a professional. But the problem is that each of these tools cost like $100 a year, or some of them cost $50 a month and stuff like that. So that's the difference from when you're just doing it for your own games. You can't pay $200 a month doing it. But when you do it full time, all of a sudden subscriptions make sense, because it's perfect. You know how much it will cost each month to stay in your job, and you get new cool stuff all the time. So for me as a professional, subscriptions actually makes perfect sense. But I can understand if I just want to use a tool for my games, I don't want to spend dollars every month whether I work on it or not.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's a place that a lot of people take for granted, people being consumers of a product, because they understand a lot of the costs that go into that, whether it's supplies or in this case subscriptions. I mean, there's a substantial amount of money that has to go in just to be able to do this. So my question on that was, do you get the request for the river and the riverbanks and the trees, and then they go in and put a camp in somewhere, or it was
No, it normally is not. The interesting, and I'm kind of surprised by that, because when you work professionally on this, you get very vague art orders, and often, especially when you work on big maps, is that the text is not often not written, and if it's being written, it's being re-edited and stuff, and you have to read some Google Doc or Word document that is put together in text. So what you usually do is I sketch it out, work a little bit, and then send it over, and they criticize it, and then come back again, and I send like a weekly update, and we work from there, so to speak. And also to have, now I work, the latest project I'm working with for Cobalt Press. Thankfully, Brian Susskind, one of the main writers on that new upcoming project, he lives on the other side of the hills, so I kind of pop over like once every 10 days or so, and we've sitting down and taken half in a day and go over all the sketches, and then I go home and work a bit, and he sits and writes, and then we kind of get together again a week or 2 weeks later and do it again, or you email back and forth. So it's a lot of, so you constantly have to learn criticism. So I've learned that criticism is the way to go forward, so to speak. So you can never be proud and say, "Oh, I nailed it. This is the way it's going to be." No, someone comes and say, "No, I don't want that. That's, the color is wrong," or whatever. So you just have to. That's one of the things of being a professional. You work in order to fulfill someone else's idea of how things should be, but you also have to be smart and sometimes stand your ground a bit and suggest things and change things without being asked, just because I feel like this works better, so to speak. And also when they come up with ideas that might take a longer time, then you simply say, well, what should I don't do? And so that's kind of a really important thing, and I can see that from a lot of people that come in early and want to talk about things. They are dead certain this is the way to do it, and they get angry if it's not right and whatever. So to be able to handle criticism is really important.
One of the questions, I came up through architecture school, so I had to learn from a very tender age that we called them crits, and you had to sit through these crits, and you'd be juried by 4 or 5 people, and maybe one of them would have a heart, and the rest of them were just like, and they were making us better. They were sharpening the knives.
Yep.
But it was a painful process, but it taught me that I just had to explain things clearly, but I wasn't necessarily going to be right. Years later, after many years as a professional graphic designer, now going on 20 years, I will sometimes say to the client, so how important is it for all this to make sense? And then they'll say, well, it's pretty important. I'm like, well, then you probably shouldn't do this or this or this, because it makes no sense. And I can only imagine if I ever was lucky enough to be commissioned to do some maps, there'll come that moment when they say, I want the river flowing north into the mountains. And
there you have the problem is that, and one of the reasons that I realized fairly quickly, the reason they hire me is because they don't think about stuff like that. They don't think much about world design in detail. They don't think about how landscapes work and so on. So you have to kind of pick their brains a bit. You have to come with these questions and very early on come and say that, okay, so if we have this, then that must be a high plateau. And if you have a jungle here and there's snowy there, then that means that area must be high up, or there must be some magic or whatever. So when they come up with a world design, I have to interpret it and tell them what that actually means, and whether it's natural geography, which I think most fantasy worlds probably works best if most rivers flow downhill and most areas follow the natural laws of physics and normal stuff. And then you have the magic and the extras and the fantastic as a spicing on top, so to speak, that you sprinkle in here and there to make it more fun. The mountains can be higher and the canyons deeper and stuff like that. You might have an occasional river that flows uphill and stuff, but that should be the exception according to me. Otherwise it will be confusing, I think.